Hello, everyone. Letting everyone in come in slowly for a couple minutes here. Just to introduce myself. My name is Christo. I am the e-commerce manager here at FIC, and I want to welcome everyone to a webinar series called Liberation Learning Series. And I'll be the host today for the workshop. If you run into any tech issues or need any assistance, don't hesitate to send me a message and I'll be monitoring the chat. Now, I'm sure most of you are probably familiar with Zoom, but I'll just cover the basics so we can make sure we're all on the same page. Just so you know, you'll have time for a Q&A session. And that being said, there is always a few ways to ask questions. One is by virtually raising your hand. This will allow us to see that your hand is raised and allow you to speak your question once we have called upon you. And also, you can click the reactions at the bottom of the screen. You can see here that when you click on there, you can raise your virtual hand. Also, if you prefer to just type your questions and don't want to show your face, that's fine. You can just click in the chat screen, which you can see pictured here. And if you're using the chat feature, you can send your message to everyone in the session, which is the default setting. Or you can send a private message to a participant or the host or me if you need assistance or prefer not to have your question public. Also, if you like to change your view of the participants and the speaker, there is the view tool at the top left of the screen. We also have Zoom meeting mode, which we'd love to hear from you now. So in the chat box, please share us your location, where you're joining us from, the name of the intentional community, if you live in one, as well as what you'd hope to learn from this session that we're having today. And we'd love to hear all of you. So please share now. We also have some upcoming events starting this October. Join a community of learners and walk together through an 8-month learning journey to become the kind of community member that you wish to grow with. We have the Communiversity cohort, which will be a bi-weekly practice sessions that cover key elements of community relationships, communication, facilitation, and working effectively through conflict and governance. And I'll put this link in the chat below, make it a little easier for everyone to access. This cohort will include Karen Gibnick, which is one of the co-authors of most of the books that we have. I'm having a little brain fire right now, but let's see, Cooperative Culture. There we go. I just read it recently, so I definitely recommend that. And I'll send more info on this. So with further ado, I would like to introduce Sky Blue and income sharing in intentional communities. And welcome, Sky. I'll pass it over to you. And just to let everyone know, we are recording this session. Everyone who can join today or won't be here, I'll email it to everyone afterwards. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Christo. Hello, everyone. So yeah, my name is Sky Blue. For those of you who don't know me, yes, Sky Blue is my real name, and yes, my parents were hippies. And I have spent 25 plus years in the intentional communities movement, including 14 years of membership total at Twin Oaks community in Virginia, income sharing community there. And I also spent a bunch of years as the Twin Oaks delegate to the Federation of Egalitarian Communities, which network of income sharing intentional communities. Done lots of other stuff too. Been involved with the FIC for a long time as well. But that's the highlight. Christo, could you stop sharing screen so I can start? Great, thank you. Okay. So, so welcome to Income Sharing and Intentional Community. So the brief, so the agenda today is I've got about a 25 minute presentation that I'm going to run through, and then we've got a panel of 4 other folks who have lived in various income sharing communities that we're going to hear from, and then we'll have a just sort of open Q&A section. I will pause for some questions after the presentation, before the panel. What I'm going to ask for at that point is for the questions that are more the like, how does this work? And tell me more about this. Like, hold those. We'll hold those until the actual Q&A session at the end. But I do, I will pause to at least between the presentation and the panel to sort of make space for like, what the heck are you even talking about? I don't understand this, whatever. So like, to try and think about those 2 different kind of categories of questions. So like I don't know what the heck you're talking about. Like, help me understand this thing that you said, versus like, tell me more about this, or I want to know more about this, or how does this work kind of questions, which again, that's for the end. But want to try and catch any sort of just glaring not understanding moments before we get too far in. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to just jump into it here. So, what is income sharing? So, the finances of any intentional community revolve around the same account categories as any business: assets, liabilities, income, and expenses. Income sharing is a community economic model where members pool the money they make and decide collectively how to spend it. So I often like to explain income sharing as distinct from expense sharing. So most intentional communities, I would say, are expense sharing. They share a limited range of expenses, usually related to the property, mortgage, rent, taxes, insurance, that sort of thing. Maybe also food, household items, some tools, things like that. But overall, you assume expenses are personal expenses unless they have been established as collective expenses. Members are individually responsible for paying for their share of those expenses, usually either equally or according to use. And they are individually responsible for generating the income they need to do so, and their finances remain independent. Income sharing assumes most expenses, including personal expenses, are the responsibility of the collective, and the group takes collective responsibility for generating the income needed to pay those expenses. Any income produced, whether it's through a community business or individual jobs, goes into a shared pool, and the group then decides how to spend it. So, why do income sharing? Intentional community, in my opinion, is all about sharing. Sharing creates an intertwined set of social, economic, and ecological benefits. Put simply, it's more satisfying, it's cheaper, and it consumes less resources. Income sharing lends itself to a greater degree of sharing, which can maximize these benefits, but it goes beyond this too. More sharing means you need less money and can collectively spend less time making money, allowing for more personal time and for the group to value work not valued or undervalued by capitalism. This most, I think, notably shows up in care work, child care, elder care, caring for sick, infirm, that sort of thing. Income sharing can also make things simpler and more efficient in some ways. There are less internal transactions that you have to manage and account for in an income sharing community. And there are ways you can centralize labor instead of everyone doing everything for themselves. Shared access to pooled financial resources can create a level of financial security and stability unavailable to most people on their own. And because access to wealth and income earning potential is generally determined by privilege, Income sharing undermines classism and capitalism by using privilege for collective benefit. If you see intentional communities as vehicles for social change, which is certainly what I advocate for as a movement, that is how we look at intentional communities. Income sharing increases the potential both for personal well-being and for collective capacity that can be leveraged for greater impact. So I think you can look at expense sharing and income sharing as being kind of on a spectrum, and there's some truth in that. But on some level, I would say that income sharing is a more sort of fundamentally different approach than expense sharing. In income sharing does look very similar to high degrees of income sharing, especially in communities that have a community business. But in expense sharing communities, individuals are still fundamentally on their own. If you are unable to produce enough income to pay for your share of expenses, you probably just can't live there. In income sharing, everyone is in it together. You only have to leave if you can't meet community agreements. Otherwise, the community succeeds or fails together. So this has its benefits, and of course, it also has its challenges. So, what are the challenges of income sharing? Community is already hard. Income sharing is more intensive, and we have a ton of baggage around money, which tends to exacerbate challenges, such as hyper individualism, dysfunctional relationships to leadership and institutions, and dynamics like martyrs versus the slackers. You tend to have to be much more aligned in your values and goals in an income sharing community because you have to make a lot more decisions together about how you spend money. You need to be more on the same page about standards like quality of life, standard of living sort of stuff, especially as well as what your priorities are as a group. Any community economic system only works if there's enough money. And I would say that this is even more so in income sharing. If people aren't getting their needs met through the collective systems that the group has set up, they will find ways to meet them individually and likely outside of community agreements, which erodes both the systems and the relationships. What I think is also true is that existing models of income sharing intentional communities have not done a good job of accommodating for individual circumstances people still have to deal with outside of the community. They tend to have been designed assuming that people will spend the rest of their lives there and that basically their entire lives are going to be contained within the community. And this is just generally not the case for most people. This means that if you live in one for a long time, but not the rest of your life, you are likely compromising your long-term financial security to some degree. And again, you're also sort of compromising your ability to deal with circumstances outside of the community that may call your attention. I don't think it has to be this way. I think there are possible solutions to these problems. But most income sharing communities have just not really found good solutions to that yet. And I think there probably are things out there, things that groups have done or are doing out there that I'm not aware of, and certainly interested in hearing that. I think what's also true is that myself and others certainly have lots of ideas about how it could be different. But for the most part, as far as I'm aware, like those ideas have not necessarily been put into practice, and so we haven't really had a chance to try them out as a movement yet. I don't think it's necessarily true that an income sharing intentional community is more or less risky than an expense sharing intentional community. I think you can kind of make the case either way. But you are more dependent on each other, which of course is kind of the point. And more of your life does tend to be involved in the community, which can make it just feel more scary and can make challenges feel like a much bigger deal. What all of this means is that it just takes a lot more work to build and maintain trust and develop the needed communication skills and emotional maturity. and to make sure your collective systems are really functioning well. So I want to get into some kind of nuts and bolts of how to do income sharing. So how do you do income sharing? Well, you make income, you share it. Duh. Okay. Uh, Not really. Yes. I mean, that is kind of it. On some level, like that is kind of it. But obviously, it is more complicated than that because for another reason, because of the world we live in. So there are different ways that it can look. There are huge differences between rural and urban, number of members, and whether there's a community business or everyone works jobs. Of course, a hybrid of a community business plus people working jobs is also possible. Again, to some extent, this is not necessarily different from all different kinds of intentional community. Any different intentional community, these are obviously some of the big differences that are going to change the experience of a community. But again, I think there's some somewhat different implications for income sharing intentional communities. Generally speaking, from what I know in the movement, rural larger intentional communities with community businesses have done better with income sharing. The reasons that I think that that is true, put simply, is that you need a degree of kind of social and cultural cohesion to make income sharing work because it is so challenging, it is so different. And it's just harder to do that in an urban setting where there is just a lot more distractions. I think a larger size is beneficial. Again, I think that this is true for other kinds of intentional communities as well, because you are able to kind of take advantage of economies of scale better, which again kind of maximizes those benefits of sharing, and as well as again the sort of social cultural cohesion that a larger group can allow for. And I think community businesses have also been important in part because there is a degree of flexibility that you get with your labor with community businesses that you don't necessarily have if you are working jobs where you probably have to do a 40-hour work week, even if you don't necessarily need to make enough money, but that's just what most employers require. So if you have a community business, it allows more to take advantage of that flexibility of needing to spend less time making money. So amenities and individual needs. So how is this addressing income sharing? So all basic needs, the basic concept with income sharing is that all basic needs for all members, including housing, clothing, food, healthcare, utilities, education, particularly of children, not necessarily of adults, access to transportation, are all held collectively. Community systems that to meet these needs can, of course, vary widely. You might have sort of, especially in larger communities like Twin Oaks or East Wind, like much like larger, more robust systems. Smaller communities, it might be a little more informal. So again, setting makes a difference too. So there's can be a lot of variation in how those systems look, but there's going to be some degree of systems that the community has in place for meeting these different needs. Income sharing communities also tend to invest in a variety of amenities as well. It's not just about basic needs. Of course, with all of this, issues can arise regarding standards, preferences, prioritization, all that sort of stuff. It is also a common practice to give all members an allowance so that they have at least some amount of money to be able to just spend on whatever they want without having to deal with the rest of the group about it. Most, if not all, from what I know, allow some amount of individual earning or receiving of gifts and spending of money outside of community systems. The more you do this, of course, the more you have to contend with inequality, either because some people have wealthier families than others, and so the more you allow people to receive gifts from family members, the more you're sort of inviting in some of that inequality. Even if it's just people working outside of the community, some people, for a variety of reasons, have access to higher paying work than others. Some just might have skills that are higher paying and can make it easier for them to get jobs than other people. So again, there are ways that you can still mitigate that, and it's the world we live in, and there is again this sort of inequality aspect that you have to contend with. Generally, sort of this outside earning and spending is often only allowed for consumables, not like items, like things that you sort of keep on an ongoing basis. Consumables or travel off the property. This is sort of the idea is that you're avoiding having people having objects of envy, is the sort of the saying that I know kind of developed at Twin Oaks, at least in the past, or just having different standards of living on the property. Sort of the idea is to try to maintain a fairly even standard of living for everybody living in the community together. Again, all of this only works if there's enough money. True for any intentional community, I would say more so for income sharing communities. Labor-based economics. So another key difference, I think, it has to do with this sort of labor or money-based economics. So while expense sharing intentional communities usually expect a labor contribution, it is generally minimal and sort of supplementary to paying money to cover the expenses of the community that you're responsible for. Expense sharing communities, their economies are still primarily monetary based. In income sharing, the primary contribution is labor, which may be income producing labor or not, sometimes referred to as domestic labor. Labor is often budgeted and accounted for just like money. Even if members work outside jobs, the agreement is to do the work, not necessarily to bring in a certain amount of income, because meeting the income needs is a collective responsibility. Now, you might be in a situation where you have a community and there are people who are working outside jobs, and as part of your budgeting process, somebody's like, well, I'm working this job, I expect to work this job this whole year, this is the amount of money I'm making. And so the community might budget saying like, okay, well, we're sort of counting on this income coming in. But if something happens, the person loses their job for whatever reason, it's not like in an expense sharing community where all of a sudden, if they can't pay for their rent or whatever, like they just have to leave. The responsibility to then sort of figure out what to do and how to make up for that lost income comes back to the collective, as opposed to just being on the individual. Also, typically, all work is valued equally. An hour is an hour, whether it's income producing or domestic. Some instances, I don't know how widespread this has necessarily been. I know at some points in the distant past at Twin Oaks, excuse me, there was some experiments done in varying the value of labor based on desirability. So more desirable being less valuable and less desirable work being more valuable. But yeah, again, typically hour is an hour, doesn't matter what you're doing. Okay, so I want to touch a little bit here on assets and liabilities. As mentioned, there are those sort of four big, broad accounting categories. We mostly have just been talking about income and expenses, but there are the assets and liabilities side. So typically, from what I know, you don't give assets over to an income sharing community, either pre-existing, like a bunch of money in a bank account or some stocks, or maybe you own a house or things like that, or acquired during membership, like inheritance is maybe the most common sort of thing. But at Twin Oaks, for example, you're supposed to loan financial assets, I mean, if you can, or not touch them, and any other kinds of assets as well. You're supposed to basically just like not touch them. And any income they produce is supposed to be turned over to the community. It's income. It's an income sharing community, so that's part of it. Again, variations can happen. You can do different things, but that's kind of the sort of basic concept. Typically, in addition to, you don't have to give over your assets. Usually, an income sharing community doesn't take on liabilities, particularly student loans is the big one. I do know that there have been some income sharing communities that have done that, have taken on people's student loan debt, at least the payments, while they were living there. But I think that is less common than more. And that is can definitely be a big barrier. It was definitely a big issue at Twin Oaks for a lot of people. People not feeling like they could join because they basically would have had to work outside of the community on top of their community labor obligation in order to be able to pay their student loan, which obviously in a rural area was not easy. So that can definitely be an issue or barrier for people. So an income sharing community could do asset and liability sharing. And again, like I mentioned, I do know of some instances where groups did lean into that to some degree. This does involve more collective responsibility for meeting individual needs outside of the community, caring for family members in particular, as well as long-term financial security. And again, I mean, these are sort of issues that are there anyway, even if you're not leaning more into asset and liability sharing. You've still got these situations where all of a sudden you've got a family, a parent, an aging parent you've got to care for. You've got a kid that grows up but still needs some support. And how is the community dealing with that? How is the community supporting people in developing some long-term financial security, having a nest egg or that sort of thing, if they leave the community again, so they're not just completely sort of shooting themselves in the foot financially by investing long periods of time in a income sharing community. Again, I think there are solutions to these problems that don't necessarily need to compromise the fundamental values, particularly around like egalitarianism and anti-capitalism and that sort of stuff that income sharing is sort of going for. Again, we just haven't necessarily had a lot of experience with the communities that we know of in how to solve those problems in a good way. So, and again, within asset and liability sharing, the more you're sort of leaning into that level of things, this can elevate both the aspect of solidarity as well as the risk, and requires, of course, again, a high degree of financial success. This only works if there's enough money. So lastly, I just want to touch on the sort of importance of budgeting and accounting. This is something that I often sort of like harp on with communities in general. In any intentional community, I believe transparent, clear, and accessible financial information and agreements is vital, along with a basic degree of financial literacy on the part of all members. In income sharing, I would say this is even more important because there are so many more decisions the group has to make that have financial implications. And they need to be on the same page about what they can spend. Everyone needs to know what the budget is, what they can spend and what the guidelines are. What are they allowed to spend money on? And I think all of this is just super important for people to make good financial decisions and to foster trust, which again in income sharing is just even more essential than in other kinds of intentional communities. I mean, I think that trust building aspect is, in general for intentional communities across the board, just super key, and even more so in income sharing. So that is the presentation. And so, again, I want to take some questions here, if there are any. Again, what I'm looking for right now, before we get into the panel, is just really like sort of basic understanding. Like, is there anything I said that you just didn't understand and you want to make sure you get before we kind of get too much further into it? Again, more of the like, how do you do this? How does this work? Sort of questions. Probably there's a good chance that some of the panelists may just sort of naturally answer those questions, but then of course we'll get to them at the Q&A at the end. So I'm going to stop sharing. Yeah. Okay. So what do we have any questions to start with? can raise your hand using the Zoom function, can wave it at me, or maybe this was all completely made total sense. Jean P.
Yeah, Jeannie.
Hi.
Yeah, I was just wondering, like, I went to the Twin Oaks conference just a couple weeks ago
Mhm.
and was talking to people from Eastwind, and uh which sounds really appealing to me. But like their allowance is $125 a month. And it's
Mhm.
like, so, with that amount, I mean, if you want to travel or something like that, or I don't know, take a month off, I think you're allowed to, take a certain amount of time off. But like that's not very much money. And
Mhm.
to save
Mhm.
up for, a plane ticket is going to take you months, and not let alone spending money and all that stuff. So
Yep.
yeah, so and then also, like you said, like savings, is
Mhm.
are any of these communities doing any kind of like a savings account for people,
Mhm.
so when you do leave the community, that there's, something that you can take with you.
Right. Yep. Yep. Great question. So we're gonna hold that for later. Anything else? Again, kind of looking for just more sort of basic, like making sure we got a basic understanding of the what we're talking about here. Okay, maybe we're good then. Stuff can always come up. Okay, so then we're gonna move into so the panel portion of this. I've got four people here, and I'm pretty sure I saw you all here. What I'll do is I'll call on each of you. You can kind of give whatever brief intro about yourself that you want, um, and then I'll give you the sort of first prompt. Uh, and the other thing that I wanted to just note about this too is that the people on this panel are not representatives of their communities or the communities that they have lived in. They are people who have lived in different income sharing communities, and they are here to speak from their experience. So just want to make that clear. Um, yeah, so let's do a little quick round of introductions. I'm going to call on the panelists. Just say your name, say whatever you want about communities that you've been part of, and then we'll keep going. So, Sean, how about you first?
There,
There you
yeah.
go.
Okay. I co-founded the Jolly Ranchers maybe 25 years ago. I was trying to remember timelines. In 1995, I guess, we were income sharing with part of the members, expense sharing with others, trying to move those folks towards income sharing. But essentially, we ended up being a hybrid the entire 10 years that we existed. And you just did a great job of kind of covering every single barrier problem we ran into. Uh, and I could speak in more detail about those things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great. Okay, Summer.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Summer, I use she, they pronouns. I lived at Twin Oaks in rural Virginia for a little over 20 years. Yeah, Twin Oaks is definitely income sharing and also aims to be egalitarian, which I think is a big sort of related piece. Yeah, I guess I'm gonna leave it at that.
Great. Michael.
Hi, I'm in a sort of income sharing group at Ghana's for 45 years, since 1980. And Ghana's has a core group that does the income sharing, and then it's hybrid beyond that.
Great, thanks. And Reggie, I'm pretty sure you're in there somewhere.
Hey, my front camera is a little cracked, so that's why I'm all blurry. I'm Reggie Blackwood. I lived at Acorn Community in Virginia from 2010 to 2018. I was heavily involved in the FEC, the Federation of Egalitarian Communities, and that means I got to watch at least 24 communities start and oftentimes fail, sometimes from on the ground, which was a great time. Notably, I tried to start a community called Mimosa from 2018 to 2020 in a double wide trailer that Acorn owned, and a thing called Shagbark at Red Earth Farms next to Dancing Rabbit back in like 2013. Yeah, nice to see you all.
Awesome. Okay. So maybe I'm gonna go in reverse order. So I'll pick on you first, Reggie. So kind of the first question I want for each of you is just simply, are there any particular things from everything that I just presented that you want to respond to? Like anything that stood out to you, anything you want to add, anything you want to correct, anything along those lines. Reggie, how about you first?
Yeah, I do think it was a really good summary, and it has obvious room for detailed explanations of things that you put pretty succinctly. I don't think you glossed over any of the problems. Yeah, like I want to go into like details, like
Okay.
answering Jean's question, or like, but I don't. From an overall, it seems good.
Okay, great. Maybe I'll just sort of Summer, Sean, Michael, any same question. Anything in particular that jumps out that you want to sort of jump in with and add or correct or anything from what I presented? Michael?
Yeah. One of the some of the most important things that happened to me in this is people dying. It can be incredibly painful because of the connection you make, and then you go with a whole group of people and everyone's going to die, and so that's a really important thing. Divorces. We've had to deal with 2 or 3 divorces, and we were able to do that without anyone having to leave the group. And you know, one member left the community or the group and was not satisfied with the negotiations and what they were going to leave with, and so that ended up in court.
Yeah, complications for sure. Sean, yeah.
I would just want to add, I think you covered everything really well, and I would say that the parts that I would want to just really highlight is the level of psychological developmental maturity I think that it takes for people to encounter the incredible level of complexity that's required in essentially being married in the way that we think about marriage commonly in a Western culture to more than one other person, right? Because I think it's that level of commitment to relationship and care of another human being that kind of allows us to transcend all of the baggage that we bring from capitalism to be able to to be all in. We've never met anybody from Ghana's, but Ghana's was one of our models for how you have to be all in to make it work. So, and I think that the being all in an organic family was actually more of what was attractive than the money sharing. The money sharing was a natural outcome of that kind of commitment to other people. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Yeah, I've definitely heard it said that, intentional community is kind of about expanding your notion of who family is. And then I like what you're saying, because like income sharing then kind of brings that in a very practical way in terms of like, yeah, you're basically married to each other. Summer, anything from you right off?
On the topic of challenges, I had a couple thoughts that you didn't explicitly mention. One was the sort of like the silent member of state systems that help income sharing communities kind of meet the needs of all members, and the capriciousness in the current climate of how those are going is kind of outside of the control of the community. And then you sort of alluded to this, but talking about like maybe having no shared goals for economic planning, but also the issue of like there might be shared goals for economic planning, but that like periodic metrics to make sure that goals are on track. There's like low involvement because that kind of engagement is like not sexy or isn't marketed well. And then one other thing, again, that you kind of hinted at was like when people don't have this sort of safety net as built by the community, I think it can lead to feeling like low trust from shared decision making with people who are can leave a little bit more flexibly. So there becomes this like dichotomy of, right, like fear around decision making because of the level of consequence for people who don't have a lot of options of where they go, versus the other, more shorter term people feeling like dismissed and disenfranchised or even exploited because they're not being taken seriously in economic decision making.
Right. Lana, I see your hand. Again, if it's a more kind of like general how do things work kind of question, let's why don't you hold that, unless this is like more kind of basic technical question.
It's a clarifying question for
Okay.
what Summer said.
Sure.
Yeah, I just didn't understand the silent member comment, and I also can't hear Summer very well. I don't know if there's like I don't know if anyone else is having that issue, but yeah.
Okay, great.
Is that any
Somebody
better?
want to start?
Yeah, that's better volume.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I guess everybody contributes to the community equally in income sharing egalitarian communities, right? As like human members who are part of the community. And like the members of the community aren't necessarily paying in monetarily into the healthcare system when there is a healthcare system that is taking care of an indigent population if the community is under the poverty line. Does that make sense? So like the healthcare system itself that pays for people who are below the poverty line is like a silent member who is contributing to that system.
Yeah, Twin Oaks in particular, because it made relatively so little money and everyone was below the poverty line. I can't even begin to estimate the amount of money that the community saved from being able to get free healthcare through the University of Virginia healthcare system. Like massive. Okay, great. So I'm going to throw. I had shared these questions, if I can find them, with our lovely panelists in advance. I'm going to throw them into the chat for you all to riff on. So the questions are: what are the biggest challenges in income sharing? And particularly, what are some of the problems with existing models that we still need to figure out? What are the most important things that make it work in terms of individual attitudes or characteristics, culture, as well as systems and structures? And why is it worth it? So any of our lovely panelists want to take a first shot at any or all of those questions, or anything else you want to share? Go for it, Michael.
I'll start with saying that the core group at Gonitz is kind of an outlier to income sharing because we got together to do a project, and we knew it was a long-term project, and we were very committed to that project. No one ever thought in terms of income sharing. That wasn't a thing that was on the table. It was just, this is what we're doing. We can't do this without doing this. It was just, and it's the nature of the project that we're doing. So it was an outcome rather than an objective that we sought.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of the things that I would be contributing along the way of the conversation is coming from that perspective.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And just to broaden it a little bit, personally, because of all of that experience, it is kind of strange for me to talk in terms of income sharing as an objective.
Mm-hmm.
I only think of it as well, that sure. What else are you going to do if you're going to have a real purpose you're shared with other people? Check.
Yeah, kind of thinking about it more as means to an end. And yeah, I would say that in my conversations with groups about income sharing, there are definitely circumstances where I'm like, I don't think it makes sense. Like, it doesn't actually make sense for what a group is doing. So yeah, I think that's a good perspective. Go for it, Sean.
I think that it's maybe interesting to look at the challenges, say, between Twin Oaks and then the Jolly Ranchers, or Emma Goldman finishing school, who was one of our close friends, communes that were also in the FEC, as the only two urban communities at that point, was how different the idea of money sharing was, right? I think, like you had spoken to, it's quite a bit different when you can think of Twin Oaks almost as a corporation owned by the employees, as a kind of Marxist project.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot easier, probably has a lot fewer barriers than all of us working at outside jobs, bringing our money in. For the purpose, we thought it was a good idea to money share because of the economy of scale that would allow us to maybe work fewer hours at outside jobs, or work jobs that were meaningful, like caregiving jobs, or working at the food bank, and also having more time to do political activism. And it did all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest challenge ended up being, I think, that when the organic group of people came together, some of those people fell away, and we started to have to kind of advertise for members, and that organic process was lost a little bit. It was very difficult to develop the level of trust in the moment to get from expense sharing into the income sharing, because what seemed to be the most attractive thing, and I don't know if other people experience this, was that there's some sense that if you say community, it's heard as, oh, there's this body of resources that I can tap into. And the idea of everybody has to contribute to the financial welfare of the project was not a common idea that people came with when they wanted to join. They did see it as a place that they could work less. Maybe everybody else would work to pay for them to write a novel, pay off their student loans. I mean, it was just the vast majority of what we were encountering afterwards. So we tried to circle back to do it to be more organic at one point, and that was better.
Yeah, I just want to highlight what you're saying, Kelly. One of the core principles of the FEC talks about the community meeting the needs of the members. And at some point a long time ago, I realized, wait a minute, it doesn't mention the fact that everyone is kind of collectively responsible for contributing to meet those needs, like you say, it's sort of like it ends up feeling like, oh, there's this community out there that's going to meet my needs, and sort of missing that other second part of it, which of course is obviously like related to internalized capitalism and all of that sort of stuff. But yeah,
Yeah.
Reggie or Summer.
I can go.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look at the questions in the chat. With biggest challenges, I think there's like a thing that I would call indoctrination. It's the getting people on that page that they are responsible for meeting other people's needs, and that is really difficult. It's difficult when like starting a community. It's difficult when bringing in new people. It's difficult sometimes with the long-term members who are tired of everyone's shit. And like every group is going to have to figure out how it's going to do that. And one of the really important components of that is having like a shared goals or philosophy of like, because some communities, like Twin Oaks as an example, the purpose of the community is to perpetuate the community. And that means to like earn income and to take care of children and elderly people and to cook meals and to do whatever the members at the time think would be good, but there's not like a greater goal that they're working towards that's more than the continuation of the community. Versus other communities that have more of a goal. Like it doesn't have to be, we're gonna, I don't know, build a tower to the moon. It can be things like we want to provide this valuable service to like the greater community of some kind. And that can bring people there with more of like the sharing, we're in this together attitude, when they understand that it's not just for the community's continuation, and the satisfaction of the people in the community is not the only goal of the community. However, there are long-running communities where the personal satisfaction of the people in the community and the continuation of the community are the only commonly shared goals, as far as I can identify. And there also needs to be this like relatively on the same pageness about standard of living, which Sky did mention that in it, like Sky used the term like personal expenses, that the community covers personal expenses. And the way I think of it is more that personal expenses get greatly shrank down, and to like address like what Jeannie was saying, that the $125 you get an allowance at Eastwind, that's an alcohol drinking limiting mechanism, because the community doesn't want to be responsible for you drinking yourself to death, is really as far as I understand the allowance. And it's true, people cannot use that for travel. The workaround on that is that people plan multi-stage travel, where the first part of the travel is that you go somewhere and earn money. Like a really common thing I did with Eastwinders back before cannabis legalization, you go work the cannabis harvest, you spend a month just trimming, you end up with a bunch of money, and then you can go do your next thing after that. So it just makes everything a bit more complicated, and you need to have some skill, wielding scissors or whatever, something that you think you can convert into cash to do the vacation. And yeah, getting people on the same page about standard of living, I feel like that is a really big hiccup to starting up communities. That you might start with no money, but as soon as you get some money, you will suddenly realize that you live with people where some people think that as soon as you get enough money, you could do a nice thing, you start increasing the quality of your food. And some people think that you'd be saving all of that for a new building to get new members so you can like continue the thing. And some people are going to think You don't have enough money to do all of those things. And these are very difficult arguments to have. And to some degree, like, people need to be on, when you're entering an existing community, you enter it and you discover their standard of living, which is like, what is like the type and quality of the food that they buy for the community. And if you join Twin Oaks, you're joining with the expectation of like having a bedroom about the same size as everyone else's bedroom, eating the same food as everyone else eats. But when you're starting a community, there's no what everyone else does. And deciding what is a community expense, you know, rice, definitely a community expense. Avocados, community expense. How often? And like in some communities, I've seen that they pay for vacations, but within like a certain, this is how much we think a vacation should cost. Or, and collectively the people have to budget together, which is hard enough as an individual, or as a married couple, and gets exponentially harder when you try and do it with 18 people. I'm going to look back at the questions. Oh, the most important thing to make it work. I think it's that, like, it's that community centeredness that Sean was talking about. And like everyone sharing that, or at least in a larger community, the vast majority of people sharing it. Like, you can get away in a 100-person community of even like 30% of them not focusing on that at any given point. But that becomes a lot more impactful when you have 5 people. Why is it worth it? Honestly, I think it's like in some that like something that Sky said about the some expense sharing communities are indistinguishable from income sharing communities. That like an income sharing community where everyone has their own different jobs and shares the income, is that better than a community that has a shared business that pays each member a salary that's equivalent, like Brighton Bush? In like terms of like fairness, equality, ease of leave, like in some ways I see that system as better than most of the income sharing agreements that I have seen. However, like, it's just really the best business arrangement I've ever seen, and we could make better income sharing agreements. That like I've seen communities that were relatively short-lived, so their retirement accounts, like, you know, we'd need a multi-decade continuing community in order to actually evaluate how those things worked in the long run. In effect, you know, the community ran for 3 years and everyone got paid out their retirement amount when the community collapsed or when they left. I feel like that could be put onto a different or larger scale. But there's an interesting component of this where you're not just saving for the retirement of the members who are in the community at that moment, you're also saving for the retirement of the members that you will have. And by like throwing in with the community, that's like putting, like, you're not making any equity at most of the vast majority of income sharing communities. But you are producing the equity that will take care of future generations that are in that community. Yeah, I think I said a bunch of things.
Okay. I want to give Summer a chance. I don't think Summer has gone in this round yet. Summer, why don't you go, and then we'll do another quick additional comments.
Yeah, lots to think about. I think the 3 things that I noted that I wanted to mention about, I guess, like the why is it worth it, or yeah, is kind of this feeling of like that sharing income and sharing resources does create this kind of, it can create this kind of magical alchemy of like more than the sum of its parts, and like an abundance that is a real, it flies in the face of scarcity mentality to kind of put 1 and 1 together and you get 50 or whatever of the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's another thing that I wanted to mention, which is the sort of, it's like inherently subversive to be income sharing, as far as capitalism says you can operate this way or you could die, and those are your choices. And choosing to do income sharing instead, while it's within the confines of capitalism, of course, but there's like these internal, transactions that happen in the community that completely sidestep that. And I think that a lot of people, like to look at Twin Oaks particularly and say, because the community is comfortable and the members there are, living relatively comfortable lives, therefore it is not political, and people there are, like the enterprise of it is not like a social movement. But I do think that income sharing is in itself, a political subversive act. Another thing that I wanted to mention is the ways that I think that it is restorative for human connection, as difficult as it is to do income sharing. Like, humans evolved to be more connected than capitalism allows. And again, the like current mainstream system feeds off of isolation, and really like that's such a huge part of the outside world commerce and way of organizing. And income sharing community allows for a level of sort of more deepening connection that I think feels good, and difficult. But when it's like, when you're in it, it's working, it's like, this is more close to what I, as a human, want to be experiencing, like an interdependence in human life, right? And of course, that leads to all of the questions about like how to build trust and how to be accountable and how to give feedback and not freak out about it, and how to determine those shared goals, and all of those things. But right, that's kind of like why it's worth it, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great. All right. Let's any quick follow-up comments from our panelists, and then we'll see if there's some questions from our lovely audience. Michael, I think I saw your hand go up.
Yeah. The magical alchemy that Summer identified, and she then followed up down the road, that it's when you can compost all the shit together, that's when the magic happens. And I think that was the Ghana's core group began with a project that was completely dedicated to how can we learn how to compost all our shit, because that's the only way we're going to learn how to love each other. And that was our beginning point. And it really is, for me personally, kind of strange to listen to the list that Reggie gave out, because those came up, but they were never overwhelming. What was really overwhelming was some of the really, really difficult stuff we had between each other, and learning how to accept it and get along with it. Check.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what I've heard from both Reggie and Michael, is really highlights that, and I think this is true for any intentional community, is that importance of shared purpose, and that it, just existing to maintain the community has its distinct problems. And again, I think the place where income sharing can exacerbate the problems as well as exacerbating the benefits.
Well, I want to point out that I think that we have a very different perspective because the communities that I am experienced with have short turnover. And that the purpose of the Ganas group, as I'm hearing you describe it, is to make a lifelong commitment to each other, which is really a different frame. And you know, you can have a group where that is the goal, is to have a lot of people that stay for a very, very long time. And then you can have communities like Twin Oaks where at any point like 50% of the people have been there less than 2 years. I could be wrong about that, but that's what it feels like.
Yeah. Again, very different. It can be very different experiences, and it really depends on what you're going for. Sean, any?
Oh, can I chime
Sarah,
in?
go ahead. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Of course, I forgot what I was gonna say. I'm gonna pause. I think it'll come back to me.
Okay. Sean, any other follow-up comments from you right now?
Just I really resonate with a lot of what Michael says. Just the messiness of human relationships, like that seems to be the fundamental thing that we need to be willing to address, whether we're in a small community or a large community, right? Because I think ultimately those skills are what we're being called upon to do, not just to survive in our own, you know, nuclear families or extended families, but, you know, big goal, transforming the world so we can all continue to live here. But, you know, as a little experimental chamber of where that might be possible to learn those skills, I really find, I found that community was the most helpful thing I've participated in for that end.
Yeah.
I remembered.
Great.
Yeah, it's just a little aside about the purpose of Twin Oaks to sustain Twin Oaks, but I think there is like this piece that I have often thought about, and it is not explicit, but I think it would be great if it were explicit, as the purpose of that community is to like be stable enough that people come and experience, like the gateway community as it's been called, but so people can go in, experience community there, look around, think about the ways that it doesn't work to their liking, and then go forth and find the more niche place that fits them better, or help build something that helps, you know, fill that gap that Twin Oaks doesn't fill. And yeah, I do think that is a viable sort of like place in the communities movement. It's like be stable enough and strong enough that, and resilient enough that people can come through and kind of go, I don't like this, I'm gonna go somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I would say too that Twin Oaks, you know, and East Wind and Acre, I mean, to some extent, all these different communities, like they really do provide, even if their primary purpose might be to just maintain themselves, they are on some level like fundamentally a radical departure from capitalism, and it does sort of provide a basic sort of model and experience for people like that there is more possible, like there is actually something else possible out there. Okay, so we have 20 minutes left in our time here. So let me see if there's questions out there. Are there any questions that anyone wants to throw at our panelists? Ardell, and if anyone wants, you know, if you want to throw a question in the chat too, that's totally fine. Ardell.
I wanted to ask about children. I'm thinking of the communities as kind of a microcosm of the polity, and children could be tricky to have some sense of fairness around, because the children may grow up and leave the community, and yet everyone, if it's income sharing, is contributing to like a family unit that has extra people who aren't of an age to contribute. Does anyone have experiences and ways of managing that?
Huge thing. Summer, yeah, I kind of want to pick on you as somebody who raised a kid in the community.
I do have some thoughts, yeah. I mean, I think one thing about that is really broadening the concept of contribution, and the fact that, you know, kids and when they're very young, their parents too, you know, aren't able to necessarily give the same types of contribution to the community as other able-bodied adult members. But many people would say that having kids around enhances quality of life in ways that, you know, is not measurable by like those types of quantification measurements. So that's one answer. And yeah, I think I'm gonna muse on the rest of it and maybe talk more about it.
Well, I'll just throw in real quick too. I mean, I at Twin Oaks, very explicitly, there's always been a very concerted effort to maintain a certain child-adult ratio to try to be able to make sure that there was, you know, it was within the carrying capacity of the community as a whole. And that was true. That's true for elders as well, to try and maintain a balanced demographic in that way. And I think what's also true is that, again, in the realm of both the benefits and the challenges being exacerbated in income sharing communities, parents not being on the same page about child rearing philosophy can be even harder than it is in other kinds of community.
Very much so.
Sean or Reggie or Micah, anything else you want to add to that? Comment on that question?
We only had a child in the community for a very short period of time. So yeah, I don't have enough experience.
Gotcha.
I think there's this interesting component of like the Twin Oaks adult child ratio and things where it's about the continuation of the community in and of itself, that like, because in a community where you outstrip your resources and your income sharing, the community collapses. Whereas if you outstrip your resources and your expense sharing, that means somebody leaves or they get a new job or something else. And that can be difficult for people to reckon with.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I've got a hand from Sealy, is it?
Seal.
Seal.
Yeah.
What you got for us?
What I'm thinking, one reason I came here is because we're sort of facing a dilemma of what we're going to do with the next 5 years. And it seems like every community is so different. I don't know if there's a way that we can connect with someone to brainstorm on our particular challenges right now, because it seems like I'm not sure that, you know, you have time for me going into something particular, but it might also be sort of a general problem that a lot of communities are having. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely people out there, including the people, panelists and myself on this webinar, who are often willing to just, you know, chat with people and talk with people about possibilities. So that's definitely out there. Before we end too, I'll sort of, you know, we'll look at kind of contact resources, that sort of thing. There's definitely some stuff available. But yeah, because there's a lot of questions around it. Again, it's sort of like both this very simple and very complex thing at the same time. Reggie?
Would we want to do a short thing like after the 2:30 deadline? I would be willing to stick around for another 20 minutes after that.
It depends a little bit on our host, but if Christo is up for keeping the room open, then yes, I think we could do that. Sure.
I can actually make you a co-host too, if you want to. We don't have anything else on the scheduled afterwards, so you're welcome to
Okay.
use.
Okay, great. So we'll kind of officially wrap up at the half hour coming up, but then yeah, people want to stick on longer, they can. Other questions out there?
I'm wondering how Jeannie feels about how that question has been addressed or not, and whether,
Thank you.
yeah, whether that wants to be addressed again.
Yeah, Jeannie, do you feel like you got what you needed from that, or you want a little
Yeah, I mean,
response?
yeah, a bit. I think there's it's just piqued my interest to kind of dig a little deeper, and but I love what Summer said. I don't remember what it was, but um but you know, it was just that there, you know, the heartening uh aspect of it, that you know, you're you mentioned political not adversion, what was it?
Aversion. Yeah.
Aversion. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know, and I'm like, yeah, that's kind of what I'm about. So, um, yeah, I just feel like this has kind of affirmed, you know, my interest, and yeah, to dig a little deeper. And I heard about some new places that I hadn't heard about, so I'm good. Thank you.
I do want to give a small response to your initial question too, about, you were asking about whether people can ever go on vacation, or, yeah, and kind of using independent wealth kind of was what I heard you asking about, right? And making money in order to be able to leave, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the feasibility of, you know, a small allowance being able to cover somebody's, you know, desires for recreation or vacation or that sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, my response, I guess, is three parts. One is, I think, you know, you really have hit on something that is, like, at least at Twin Oaks, like, totally unsolved. Like, in terms of, there are people who would love to be able to travel more, or, you know, be able to use outside funds for more things, and just don't have them. And that just creates inequality from people who can do that because of, like Sky was saying, they have family members who can give them that money so they can do that or whatever, versus people who don't. And that is an open question, completely not solved. And the community does allow for things like taking time away for a period of time and then coming back, so you can leave, make money however you feel like it for a year or whatever, go do what you want, and then come back. So that option does exist too. And then the other two pieces were, one is like the size, at least at Twin Oaks, like the size of Twin Oaks, like allows for, and like when we talk about like culture, I think that, you know, digging down into that a little bit is like creation of collective entertainment and connection opportunities that are like so abundant that it actually is like concerning to newer members, that helping them say no to do things, because there are just like so many opportunities to be social and do things, that it becomes difficult to, you know, guard one's time with oneself. And so like having those kinds of levels of opportunity for, you know, being tapped into those types of needs, like getting those needs met, is just very vibrant at that community anyway. And then the last thing, I just want to mention from my personal experience and making personal equity, et cetera. I was like, I lived in Twin Oaks for over 20 years. I moved there as a very young adult and had nothing when I moved there. I raised a daughter in community who's 16 now, and she didn't want to live there, and wanted to leave. So long story, but basically I wound up leaving the community, and, you know, I kind of had nothing. And the community gave me a historically sized leaving loan, and that was $4,000. So I, you know, I managed.
Loan or grant?
Loan.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But right, like just yeah, all I'm doing is like kind of naming challenges and naming issues because, right, like when a community of that size says like, oh, a member who's been there 20 years, like what you get when you leave is $4,000 that you have to pay back is like, and I wasn't mad about it, you know, because of the precedent that how it has been, but like I want it to change, but it wasn't like I expected something else to happen for me, you know, like
Yeah.
I think that that is a big issue that needs to be addressed at Twin Oaks, but yeah, that's
And
it.
I would
It's
just
almost
say
like
that,
once you get in, you got to stay in, kind of.
right, right. And
Except that
again,
it's
that's kind of what I was sort of getting at, you know, in the presentation, that like that is how, you know, Twin Oaks in particular, and to some extent other communities, were sort of designed, sort of assuming that people would move there and they would live there the rest of their lives, which is just not how things have actually worked. And again, I think it is often taken like what Summer is describing. It's often taken as like, oh well, that's the way income sharing communities are, and it's like, well, that is the one way that the ones that exist are, but it doesn't actually have to be that way. Like there are other ways that communities could structure themselves, still being income sharing, still meeting the same values, but aiming to solve some of these different problems. We just, again, we haven't seen a lot of examples of them actually doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think the other little comment I want to throw in there too is, again, it's the sort of thing of like, you know, it was this funny experience back in the, you know, the 2000s when I was FEC delegate and Jolly Ranchers and Emma Goldman finishing school were involved. These, you know, smaller urban communities that sort of, you know, tended to want to be a little more flexible in their income sharing because of the sort of the pressures of urban living and things like that. And so it always, there was this sort of perennial question of like, you know, well, how do you have to be like 100% full income sharing to like qualify as, you know, being egalitarian? And there was always this sort of question of like, okay, well, like there's clearly different circumstances, and you know they're trying to work with that, and so, you know, how far do we stretch? Like how far do we want to accommodate in that way? Okay, a couple other questions coming in here. Caitlin, why don't you jump in, and then Mary.
Hi, I was wondering if anyone has experienced like if an elder in the community developed dementia and how that was handled as a community, if that's happened.
You want to tackle that? I mean, Twin Oaks, I would say, you know, does an exceptionally good job, not perfect, but at dealing with members in varying, you know, dying members in varying degrees of challenging situations. But long-term dementia, maybe not. Like that is a thing. Any of our panelists do we have any experience with that sort of thing, like long-term, really debilitating sort of stuff?
It seems like it would be it seems like it'd be a lovely thing to be able to do if it were a choice that the community could make. I mean, I have personal experience taking care of both of my parents without the benefit of community support. So I know it's doable by, you know, two people throwing their energy and money at it, my partner and I would think, I would like to imagine that it would be just that much easier with a larger group of people. You know, that said, again, it would have to be one of those, well, standard of living. I really like that term that Reggie was using for defining that. If part of the standard of living is that we're going to be committed to providing long-term care for somebody with dementia, or say somebody who might be born into the community with severe mental cognitive disabilities, right? Like if we're preparing for that, if that's a value of ours, I just think it's something we could figure out how to do.
Yeah. Okay, let's hit this last question, and we're going to do some wrap up stuff, and people can stay on afterwards if they want. Mary, what do you got?
Yeah, so I'm just really curious about the hybrid model. If somebody who's experienced that could talk a little bit about the practicalities of how it works to have those two models working within the same community. Just
And you're
practically.
specifically referring to like having a community business as well as people working outside of the community. Is that what you're referring to?
Having income
And
sharing
having
and
an
expense
income
sharing.
sharing and an expense sharing. Those two to me, very different sort of.
Oh, I see. Like having the income sharing core group and then a larger like Honest has. Right.
Or the
Yeah.
example at Dancing Rabbit with Sky House, where it's a big eco village, and then one house decided to become income sharing within the eco village. So it wasn't like a core thing. It was just any group of people could decide to start sharing all their money at any point. But I'll let someone else answer for the rest of it.
Yeah, Michael, is there anything else you want to say about the experience of having an income sharing core group that's part of a larger community that is not income sharing?
Our situation is very challenging. First of all, is that because we did share income or pooled all our resources, we were able to purchase all of the houses, the 8 houses and the 3 commercial stores. And so we own all that property. And so when people who come to live in the community, it sets up a strange dynamic, because it's very hard for people to not interpret that as a capitalist arrangement. And so you have that kind of static that's there. And so to make that work really, really well would require a large scale composting process for the whole community. And that's very difficult to do, because people have to want to buy into that kind of transformative work and problem solving work. And that takes a lot of motivation.
We ended up having, well, we had core members that completely money shared, and that was its own thing. But the other people, we would have them cost share, or what were you guys calling it before? Sorry. Yeah, expense sharing.
Expense sharing.
And so we were in the process of purchasing the 2 houses that the community lived on. And so to try to mitigate what might look kind of capitalist or 2-tiered, we didn't have the people who were expense sharing pay towards the principal of the house, because they wouldn't, unless they stayed, they wouldn't necessarily get that equity back out. And so we didn't think it'd be fair that they pay into the equity, but everybody kind of had to pay into the taxes and the insurance. And then we did try to figure out, so that worked pretty well, I guess. And then we figured out how much we spent on groceries a month and other bills, and just divided that up equally.
We do dues paying.
So I want to go ahead and kind of wrap up here. I'm throwing some links in the chat. So out there, I don't know, maybe after we sort of officially wrap, I don't actually know what the current state of the Federation of Egalitarian Communities is. Reggie could maybe give us a little update, but the website is there that does list a number of the different communities that have been a part of that, if you want to sort of explore that more. I also see Raven on the call, who helps run the Commune Light blog. So I put that link in the chat there too. And I threw in my website and email address. One thing I want to note real quick is that I am part, and Caitlin, who was on this call too, are part of a Western Washington, kind of Puget Sound, Seattle region income sharing intentional communities umbrella group. So kind of working on trying to foster or rekindle enthusiasm for income sharing intentional communities, particularly in this region. So if you are in the sort of Western Washington region and want to reach out to us about that, then please contact me. Raven, real quick.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know the FEC website that you put there is not the correct one. It's out of date. They have a new website, and I will find out what it is and put it in the chat. I know it is, but I can't manipulate the computer at the same time.
Okay. Cool. Okay, great. Well, I think that basically I did want to answer one other quick question. There was a question about legal entity structures for income sharing. So just real quick answer to that. So just one thing to remember is that, you know, legal entity and tax status are two different things. You know, in terms of legal entities, for income sharing, you basically have kind of the same options that you have with other kinds of intentional communities. So you're probably either going to be an LLC, you're going to be some basic kind of corporation, you're going to be like a zero or limited equity housing cooperative. So kind of basic, you know, and then whatever in your state, there's going to be whatever the options for legal entities are. So in that sense, it's not really that much different. You can be a 501d if you're an income sharing community, the only requirement of which is having a shared treasury. And so that is a tax exempt tax status with the IRS that is available to income sharing communities that is not available to other kinds of intentional communities. So that's the super quick answer on that. Okay, so thanks everyone for participating in this. This has been lovely. Thanks to Summer and Michael and Reggie and Sean for showing up and sharing your experience. This officially closes it. Again, Reggie has offered to stay on. I'll stay on a little bit longer too. If there's any additional questions, then we can field those. Otherwise, thanks everyone, and yeah, have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.